One of my longtime clients is a radio station here in Chicago. We have a really cool shot planned for them that they can use for an ad. They're known as the Voice of Chicago, and their studio is right downtown on Michigan Avenue. So the shot I need to create will show one of their on-air news team talents slaving over a hot microphone right in the heart of the city. It just so happens that one of their studios actually faces the street. So we plan on shooting either from inside the studio looking out to the street, or from outside the building looking back towards the studio. Or we might even shoot it both ways if we have time. Either way, we're going to have to carefully blend the flash with the available light. We'll have fast control over that flash system that we use. And we'll need a wireless triggering system that'll work in a tough spot. And we might even need a lot of flash power too.
The Qflash system from Quantum is powerful, portable, and makes great lighting simple.
Blending flash with available light usually means a little experimenting. This shot calls for blending some flash placed inside a radio studio with the available light from a big city outside the studio. And we're not quite sure if we're going to have our camera indoors or outdoors until we get on the set. We need to be prepared to raise or lower the flash power during the shoot and to turn on or turn off one or two of the flashes as needed, and we'll probably flip between exposure modes or power settings on these flashes too. It's a perfect job for my Qflash gear that's all controlled from the cool Qflash Pilot that gives me the freedom to not only trigger the remote flashes in TTL or manual or auto or other modes, but I can also change the flash settings right from the camera position too. I expect this shoot to need two lights. One that I'll bounce off the ceiling inside the studio to make some interesting light, and the second to make some direct flash with sparkle and detail outside on the sidewalk. We'll also be blending colors with the warm cast of the city street at night with the bluish cast of the daylight flash. I've got lots of creative control on this shot, and I'm not totally sure what we're going to end up with, but I want to stay very flexible on my settings, which means I'll have total control over my two lights and their power values remotely. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to set up my Qflash Pilot on my camera to give me that level of control. First up, the light we'll place inside the studio. I'll use a trio on a light stand with no reflector, powered by a Turbo SC battery, held in place with a QBC clamp. Nothing fancy here. This will allow me to throw light around the room, and I'll take advantage of the built-in FreeX radio to trigger the trio from the Pilot. I use channel 1 typically for most of my Qflash gear, so let's get this trio ready to go and receive signals from the Pilot by powering up the trio by pressing the power button on the battery pack. We'll press the radio soft key and be sure that the channel is set to 1. Then I'll use this soft key here to tell the radio to work in receive mode that uses the RX menu item, and this will let the trio work under the control of the Pilot. Finally, I'll set the trio to work in wireless remote group R1 mode by pressing the mode button, then pressing the plus or minus buttons to scroll through to the RG or remote group mode. And this one happens to be set to group R2 from my last shoot. So I'll press the set button and press the minus arrow to pop it right into remote group R1 mode, and there it is. Remember, when you use the Pilot, all the exposure mode and power setting mode info for the trio comes from the Pilot. Next, we'll need more flash power to throw some light around that busy nighttime sidewalk. So up on a light stand goes one of my Qflash T5DRs, along with a Turbo 3 battery, held in place with a QBC clamp. We'll connect up an FW7Q receiver and set it to channel 1. And when we press the power button on the Turbo, the T5DR springs to life and will let us work in the remote flash mode by pressing the mode button, and I'll use the up or down button to scroll through the modes and land on wireless remote group R2. Let's fire up the Pilot and let's get a test shot by mounting the Pilot to the camera and powering up the Pilot by using the internal batteries right here. Then we'll turn the camera on last. And we'll set it so the pilot will work on channel 1 by pressing the soft key here, then the plus or minus buttons to scroll through the modes to 1. And we want to take control of the direct light from the trio in remote group R1 here, so we'll set it to QTTL exposure mode. We will press this soft key here, then the plus or minus button, and put it in QTTL mode. This tells the trio to work wirelessly in QTTL exposure mode. Simple, huh? Next, the light from the T5DR is going to be set to work in remote group R2. So we're going to tap this soft key twice to highlight group 2. Then let's hit the plus or minus buttons to select the QTTL mode. Now we may change this into manual mode probably, but for now let's work in QTTL mode to let the system help us out with some exposures. You'll see the remote group R3 mode is also in QTTL mode, but we're not going to use group R3 in this shoot. At least I don't think we are. So let's turn it off by pressing the soft key here 3 times, then the plus or minus buttons to scroll to, you guessed it, off. We're all set up. Let's give it a try. That's some good looking light. Well, we've decided we're going to switch over to a real wide shot. So I've got a 14mm lens, of course the pilot up on top. This is going to allow me to control those 2 flashes independently. So if I want the inside light to be, say, in TTL mode, I can leave it that way. And if I want the outside light to be in manual mode, I can do that way too. This allows me to raise and lower the power and the exposure modes of each one of those lights independently, so I can shoot on the fly any way I want to. So I'm going to mix it up between horizontal shots, vertical shots, with long shutter speeds, shorter shutter speeds. I'm even going to mess around with color just a little bit here too. So take a look at some of these images as I shoot them, and I'll come back and we'll show you some more too.
2 Qflashes in use here, one in the studio in QTTL mode with 0 exposure compensation, and the one that you see on your left side of the screen on the sidewalk there, that's in manual power mode. And I started off in half power, but I decided that was a little too hot, so I adjusted on my pilot that power down to 1/4 power. And let me show you how I do that. I'm going to tap this soft key here 2 times. That'll take me down to the remote group R2. And then I can just tap the plus or the minus button as needed to move the manual power up and down in 1/3 stop increments. Can't be any more simple, can it? I do use a tripod a lot. In this case, this is a carbon fiber tripod because I know I was going to be moving around a lot, not only outside, but when we go inside later today too. Somewhere during the shoot here, and this shoot was about 16 minutes long, and we've condensed it to maybe 2 minutes here for the video for you, I flipped over to a 14mm lens. So I went from that short zoom to a 14mm f2.8 lens. ISO did not change. We stuck right at 1000, and all the lenses that we use are relatively fast, so our aperture went from wide open at f2.8 to maybe as tall as f4. Color white balance, we used the adjustable Kelvin balance and kind of tweaked it in for creative effect instead of a neutral looking image. We wanted higher impact instead of accurate color.
Okay. High impact shots from the exterior of the building is what we were going for, and boy do we have them. Ready? Let's take a look. First off, just the available light looks like this with no flash firing. Next, we put 1 flash inside the radio station. Boom, that's what it looks like there. Then we also have that second flash that's outside on the sidewalk. That's what it provides for us. And we put all those together, we've got a really nice combo of images. Not only horizontal and really wide horizontal, I switched to a 14mm lens right there, but wow, vertical shots. Isn't the flag up there really fun? Cool stuff, right? These images are exactly what we were trying to get away with. We wanted lots of impact. We wanted to get the whole thought of the city there. We've got somebody working late at night. It's terrific. But we also want to add a more human element to it, as well as a higher technology element. So inside we go. Ready? Here's the shots that we did on the inside looking out of the radio station. I think they're even cooler. For this shot, we're going to do something a little different. I've only got one Qflash over there that I've got in kind of an unusual position for me. First up, my camera position is going to be over here on a tripod, of course, and Paula is going to be on the microphone. The opposite side is where my light is going to be, shooting straight back into the lens. Now, that light is going to throw a little bit of light in the room, but it's going to concentrate the majority of its light coming right back at the opposite side of Paula's head, as well as putting a really nice reflection on the control panel and maybe on the back of the chair too. Now I'm going to leave that flash in manual exposure mode, and I'm going to adjust the power setting of that flash from my pilot. So I'll be able to go from, say, a 64th power up to maybe a 16th power in order to get hot spots and some darker spots anywhere I want it to go. Color-wise, I'm still in adjustable color temperature mode, but it's all about the light. So I'm going to play with my shutter speed to bring in more light from Michigan Avenue, as well as I've got dimmer switches here on these track lights, and I'm going to adjust the manual power setting through my pilot to adjust that flash. That's going to give me complete control over how much room light, how much light coming in the windows, and how much light I'm going to have for flash. Could lead to some really cool looking shots. Take a look and see for yourself.
What are you guys going to do? Go home and have some beer after?
I'm going to mix up my camera angles a little bit for this. Now, this is a 14 millimeter lens. In close environments, that means there's a lot of information there. I'm going to go from a higher angle like this, which takes some of the city out of the emphasis of the shot, down a little lower, right about there. That's going to bring more of the drama of the city back in. And of course, Paula and I get along terrifically. We work together and we get a chance to goof around on all kinds of different projects like this. And she's just a dream to work with. So you'll notice that one Qflash right behind Paula, allowing me to not only rim her with light, but don't forget, because of the design of that Qflash tube, it's going to throw light all over that room. So I'm kind of spoiled that I'm being able to use this one light, blending it with a little bit of light from the track lights there in the studio, with lots of light of the outside to get a cool shot.
Been there for a while.
I haven't been to that one.
We have to be very careful with the wide lenses like a 14, because if you angle them down or angle them up, they will distort more than if you have them just level. And we want some of that distortion to make cool shots like these.
I got to tell you, these images are some of the images that I'm putting into my portfolio. I love these shots, and the fact that we did them really quick and really high impact are terrific. One of the things that I want to share with you is I like to do cropping of some of my images in post-processing, and I'll do some other things too, like darken the corners and stuff, but we've got to start with those great files. So let's take a look at one of my favorite shots. I'll show you how I cropped it and how I applied a little bit of post-processing to it. Ready? Here's one of the shots of Paula. And by the way, Paula is terrific. She's a good friend of ours, and I love working with her at the radio station, as well as having her do some voiceover stuff for us. This is just a regular shot here, and I went to one that was a little wider. Pretty nice shot, but I want this to be more panoramic. I think the idea of this shot is to show the scope of the city and the scope of the radio station, so I'm going to crop it down first of all like this. And I'm going to darken the corners with a vignette just a little bit, like this. I'm going to increase the color saturation just a tad. And one of the neat things about Lightroom is I can bring up the black level. I'm going to bring up the black level to give it a ton of punch and end up with, boom. Can you believe that? I just love these shots. I've got about 25 of these images just with that one single light, that give me exactly what I'm looking for. So high ISO on the camera, right? We're working at 1000. Using a lens that's got very bright capability, an f2.8 lens, also autofocuses like a dream. Using that Qflash placed beyond Paula, coming right back, giving me that silhouette was exactly what I wanted to. The Qflash allowed me to shoot nice and fast. It never overheats. It keeps up with me speed-wise, and having the remote control ability to change the values inside that really made this shot. Now, Paula's actually working while we did this, so we only had a very short amount of time. That's where I've got to use equipment that I can count on, and you know how much I count on the Qflash gear. Pretty cool stuff. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do.
There's plenty more great Qflash video tips from Will Crockett, as well as other top photographers, available for you free of charge at QTM.com.